Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Idaho House Republican Podcast, where you get to learn a little bit more about the representatives that you have sent to the State House. And today we're super grateful to have Representative Josh Wheeler, and he represents District 35. He sits in Seat B, and he's in his second term. Welcome to the Idaho House Republican Podcast, Representative Josh Wheeler.
Thank you, Victor. Glad to be here.
Hey, let me tell you a little about Josh, okay? So he was born and raised in Ammon, Idaho. He's a graduate of Hillcrest High School, which is cool. He had a construction management degree from BYU. He got his MBA from Idaho State University, and he's 1/3 of a third-generation owner of Wheeler Electric, which means you can be fired by many generations because you're only a third. You don't have the controlling stake.
There you go. That's
How do you like that? So you're also, we're on Ammon City Council. And the most important thing, of course, is that for 30 years you have been, you were joined by your wife, Dr. Laramie Wheeler, in this thing we call life. And you have 6 beautiful children. And then a month ago, what happened?
Well, we did have a first grandbaby adopted into the family.
Isn't that amazing?
So it is a tremendous blessing.
Amazing. And the name of that beautiful grandchild?
Her name is Sybil.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. And again, thank you for coming on Idaho House Republican Podcast.
You bet.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your district. Tell us about where District 35 is and what those people have sent you to the State House to accomplish. What's the most important issues to them?
You bet. Well, the joke is that if it touches Wyoming, I represent it, because District 35 is comprised of Teton, Bear Lake, Caribou, and then eastern Bonneville and Bannock counties. So again, it's just sort of everything that stretches out to the east there and touches Wyoming. And some of the biggest priorities I think you find in District 35 still very much an agriculturally focused economy. Because we're fortunate to have Caribou County, we care a lot about mining also. You may or may not recall that the only elemental phosphorus patch in the continental United States is found in Soda Springs, Idaho. And District 35 cares very much about public education, and like most Idahoans, cares about family. And so I will tell you that those are the things I was sent here to do, is to make sure that we continue to protect our agricultural heritage, that we continue to have a strong, safe state for families, especially for kids and grandkids to come back to the state and contribute to the economy.
And to stay, right?
Yeah, and to stay, absolutely. And so I think those are some of the priorities that you find in District 35. One of the things that's most interesting is that I actually have resort communities in multiple counties in District 35, because Teton County has Driggs and Victor, which are resort communities, and then you go down into eastern Bannock County and you find Lava Hot Springs. And so they're separated by a fair distance still, and yet there ends up being a lot of shared challenges and interests, that are unique to resort communities. And
so let's talk about the committees on which you represent. Which committees are you on in the House?
Yeah, so right now, I have been for all 4 of my years in the House so far. I'm on the House Health and Welfare Committee. I also now serve on the Business Committee, and just this year have been made vice chair of that committee. So that's been an interesting learning experience. Yeah. And then I'm also on the Local Government Committee, which I've also served on local government for all 4 years of my time here in the House too. So,
Representative, why did you want to run 4 years ago?
Oh, public service for me, Victor, ever since I started, which was really only when I ran for Ammon City Council, has most been about giving back to a community that has just given a tremendous amount to me. I'll tell the story briefly, but 7 years ago and just a week at this point, we buried one of our children. He was 10 years old at the time.
Wow.
And he had suffered an undiagnosed brain tumor that hemorrhaged, caused severe neurological trauma. He lived for 6 months in and out of the hospital, and then the tumor returned, and he passed away. And he was a tremendous light in our life. His loss is still felt and always will be, I think. But our community was so good to us. I mean, they were there make sure our kids would get to school, you
Right.
know, when we sometimes didn't know up or down.
Meals and
Built a wheelchair ramp for him, you know, hung our
Wow.
Christmas lights. I mean, just what you would expect from good Idahoans. And I just, you know, obviously there was a void I felt after his passing, but I also just felt like I had to find a way to give back to my community. And a good family friend who had been a former mayor of the city of Ammon said, you know, there's an opening on city council. I think you ought to run. And that felt like a way to give back. And so that's what got me involved in politics to begin with.
Right.
And then as I had served for a few years on the city council and I saw some of what was happening over here in the State House, and I looked at the gentleman that was representing us at the time, I just felt like he was not representing the values of that community who had been so good to me in that way. And so my wife and I had some discussion about it and said,
you went
put our
for
hat
it.
in the ring, you know, and here we are. And been grateful for it ever since. It's a tremendous privilege, but it is also a fascinating work to do, to be here in the State House.
Let's talk a little bit about education. You said education matters a lot. You know, as a person who's been watching, I feel like the public education commitment that you have made has been a little overshadowed by things like House Bill 93, where we talk about $50 million of a huge, you know, $3 billion commitment.
Sure.
You've doubled the amount of money in 10 years to the public schools, 84% more dollars going to each kid in the last 10 years. And there's been results, right? Highest graduation rates in 10 years, number one return on investment for education, according to the Heritage Foundation. 7% of our kids are graduating with some accredited certificate that they've gotten from their credits they've gotten while they were in high school.
And the go-on rate has improved significantly.
Right. 1.8 million college credits have been earned while kids are in from the $170 million program. Just talk about like how critical it is that we remind ourselves of the commitment that not only the governor, not only the superintendent of public instruction, but the fact that the legislature has been a big part of the continuing success of public education here in Idaho.
Well, I think you make a good point, Victor, that those successes have really been overshadowed by some of this recent conversation. And you know, the thing about District 35 that I find interesting is I represent 9 school districts.
Wow.
And so, you know, there are a couple school districts that are the larger school districts for which the conversations like the ones we've had about HB 93 have some significant meaning, right? But then as I get out into my rural communities, right, whether it be Marsh Valley or North Gem or down into Bear Lake, you know, there aren't private schools. There aren't a variety of options like that. That public school is the heart of that community. That is where that community is on Friday nights for basketball games, right? Or for the school player.
It's the heart.
100% it's the heart. And they do tremendous work. And you know, one of the things that when I came into office, my first term, is that I pushed hard for and was privileged to carry bills to help fund CTE education more. I mean, you talk about the 1.8 million college credits. That's important.
Huge.
But I think it's just as important to recognize how many more options we're opening for our kids to get into the trades, to apprenticeships, to CDLs, to
critical,
you know, applicable skills right out of high school. And I'll tell you that one of the school districts in District 35 that does a tremendous job with that is Bear Lake. If you get down to Bear Lake School District and walk through their CTE classrooms and see what they're doing, whether it be with business, whether it be with automotive, whether it be with, you know, woodworking, et cetera, they are really a gold standard for how it gets done. And interestingly enough, like you were talking about, you know, the results in terms of ROI for the dollar spent on public education, their literacy rates are also top in the state.
Right, and that's been a huge commitment from our governor and down, of course, through our superintendent of public instruction. But the legislature's been behind that effort
very much
by giving the resources that we need and committing more money to our teachers, a lot more money to our teachers. So the legislature should be proud in its role in educating our kids. And when you talk about CTE, you know, you think about the agricultural needs, the timber needs. How about the mining that's coming?
Yeah.
Or how about the nuclear industry that's going to be coming to Idaho? These trades are going to be critical to not only what we already do, but the future of Idaho.
Yeah, very much so. And I think also one of the other things to bear in mind is that there's just a lot of unexplored opportunities for CTE. I mean, we talk about mining, and the truth is, like spent nuclear fuel or these small modular nuclear reactors. I mean, I think most of you probably saw the news story about the Army demonstrated that they could land a small modular reactor in a combat zone without
and plug it in
a problem.
Yep.
And so all of that is coming. And so you're exactly right. Things like operators, right? Things like mechanics.
Well,
and the reason I am so
yeah.
behind the idea of career technical education is that for too long we pushed college as the only solution. And so that's one of the other things I've just been grateful to be part of this legislature that has recognized we need to expand what we mean by go on rates, right? And I think one of the things that we've lost in the conversation too, and I'm confident that as we move into future years, we'll get some of this conversation back, is we can really strategically deregulate some of what our public schools are having to deal with. And that will just continue to get better results long term.
Now, with President Trump, of course, signed 4 executive orders trying to create a new renaissance of nuclear energy. Hopefully, Idaho will be a huge part of that. But you did mention mining, and even this administration is more open to helping mines get the licensing they need and to open more quickly. What do you see? Do you see that as a big opportunity in your legislative district and in that part of Idaho?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity for the state, right? But yes, in my district, I mean, it's remarkable. Down there in Soda Springs, we have Bear and we have Edifos that are 2 of the largest employers in that community, and that community does very well because they've got good, hardworking, good-hearted people, that are in those industries, and they also attract, mechanical engineers and other people of that caliber, and all of that is happening. And NEPA right now, I mean, you can basically have a guy who his entire career involves getting 1, maybe 2 permits in a mine in a 30 to 40 year career.
Yeah.
Right. And that just, it sort of boggles the imagination, right? Because it clearly that's gone beyond what we need it to do, right? That process is no longer protecting the public interest. It is delaying in the name of delay only at this point.
Right.
So I am grateful for this administration's push to look to reform that process.
Let's talk about some of the Representative Josh Wheeler bills that are in the legislature, if you don't mind me completely pivoting. So let's talk about House Bill 611, and it's about it's called the Idaho Prior Authorization Reform Act. Can you tell us what that is and what problem is it solving for Idahoans?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So prior authorizations, I think you can talk to almost anybody and they'll have a story, right? But they're a tool that the insurance industry has employed for many years now, theoretically to control costs, right? They're the idea that your doctor says, Victor, we think that you need imaging on your shoulder so we can decide, if you need an actual surgery on it or if this other procedure would fit the bill, right? And then the insurance company, through the prior authorization process, has some faceless person in Virginia pick up the phone with your doctor and say, well, according to the chart here, that's not medically necessary. We need Victor to go do 6 weeks of physical therapy before we'll even consider it. And so we've all jumped through those hoops. And it's just interesting, as I've brought it up more and more, everybody has a story. They were lying on the surgical table and the prior authorization got repealed before the procedure. So there's all kinds of things like that. And so we've recognized, and even the industry has recognized, that there's a need for clarity and transparency and some guardrails on that prior authorization tool. And it's become a particularly important conversation point at this point in the legislature because last session we passed House Bill 345 to move towards comprehensive managed care for
that was called the Medical Reform and Cost Containment Act.
That's the one, correct, yeah. And because we're moving to that comprehensive managed care, it's very important that we have as much conversation as we can right now about some of these tools so that when we go out for the RFQ for that contract, for the comprehensive managed care contract, will have the right Idaho tools and solutions built into that contract. And so that's what House Bill 611 does. It basically sets some reasonable timelines. It sets some transparency requirements. It asks both the insurance industry and then the providers and hospitals to come together for a standardized electronic submission form. And then it also, again, the transparency element is that it basically publishes so that patients and providers can see, here's what's required for prior authorizations. And so that can kind of help with planning ahead of time rather than it becoming reactive and costly. And some of the research is fascinating. About 83% of physicians have cases where they can show that patients have either delayed care or went away from the recommended care because of the prior authorization process to the point of ending up with worse outcomes in the end, right? Because the one that always sticks in my mind, it seems small, but I started with that imaging comment because the patient ended up with nerve damage in her hand because she was trying to comply with the 6 weeks of physical therapy when in that particular case,
she should have just gotten the surgery.
So it's something I've known about for many years. I sat on my own self-funded insurance plans board of trustees and saw how those prior authorizations would sometimes not work out in the best long-term interest of the plan. My wife, you mentioned, is a physician. She stepped away from the insurance market about 10 years ago because one of the reasons was she had grown tired of the fact that she had 3 of her 15 employees were full-time dedicated prior authorization and coding chasers, right? And so it has become an industry challenge, and it's become a tremendous administrative burden. And I can't remember if we had talked. There's another bill making its way through the process right now of mine,
House Bill 655.
That's right, and I would call it the cousin to 611.
Right, it's another prior authorization bill.
It's definitely prior authorization related. Last year we passed a bill. We recognized that one of the things we need. We have one of the lowest per capita physicians in the nation as a state. And so one of the things we need is just a better, stronger pipeline of physicians. And part of that is medical students, being educated. And part of medical student education is getting clinical opportunities, right? Or preceptorships. Yep. So last year we passed a bill to provide free continuing medical education credits to physicians who take on medical students. Well, that was well received, and we're starting to see some traction there, but we realized that we could do a little more, and that's what 655 does, is it says, physicians, if you take on a certain number of grad students, then we're going to grant you exemption from prior authorizations for 1 year. With guardrails, there can still be audits and especially in rural communities. Especially in rural,
right?
Yeah.
That's the emphasis.
So that's sort of, and we set it up as a pilot program. It's one that Representative Healy's working on me with.
Right, I saw she's a co-sponsor with you.
And so it's pretty exciting, but it's been interesting to kind of see the response from the physician community to say, oh, that would absolutely make it so I could take on more medical students. I mean, so they are just
very cool,
admitting like, yes, this is enough of an administrative burden that you would free up hours that I could use to mentor med student.
Now, did your wife inspire you to do some of these things since she's a doctor?
I will definitely grant some of the inspiration to her, for sure.
And also, people should know that Representative Dory Healy, who's Legislative District 15, has got a background in nursing.
Yep.
And she's gone old school. She goes to your home now. She's like, it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's
her business model is really neat, actually. Yeah.
So it's nice that, the gifting she has can be used for something like this to solve something that the average person may not think about, but could have a meaningful impact on Idaho and its medical community.
Yeah,
so it's very cool. Let's talk about another bill that you're doing, which is House Bill 585. And it deals with timeliness and accountability standards in electrical, plumbing, and mechanical inspections. So a little different, but tell me what inspired that bill and what this bill will do.
Well, I'm going to say 2 things. And interestingly enough, I think this one is a little bit inspired by House Bill 611 or vice versa, because both of them are seeking to use this sort of shot clock tool, right, to improve efficiencies in the way government works. Obviously, 585 is inspired by the fact that I am an electrical contractor by trade.
Yes, that's the Wheeler Electric part.
That's right.
There you go.
Last session, we passed a bill that put a 48-hour shot clock on building inspections. Basically said if a county, city, or the state can't get a building inspection done within 48 hours, then the citizen or the contractor can basically get a refund for any fee that they've paid for that already and can go contract with a third-party private
to get the
inspector. And the private inspector has to have the same qualifications that our state, county, or city inspectors would have, but that would allow them in those cases to overcome any delays, right? And continue any construction
And delays
project.
are costly.
100%. And it's all part of this sort of like ongoing, housing affordability conversation that we see. Chairman Redmond, of course, was part of the housing task force.
Right.
And they had a lot of recommendations come out of it. This idea sort of had come about before that task force even formed, but I think it fits right in with their mission. So 585 is just sort of the next logical step. We saw that for a year, it worked well to have that 48-hour shot clock on the building inspections. We actually heard from the industry, whether it was from AGC or from the home builders, that it was helping to maintain a good rhythm for their construction projects. Perfect. And so the next logical step was, okay, well, let's extend that then to mechanical, electrical, and plumbing inspections. And so that's 585. Same shot clock, 48 hours.
48 hours.
So I mean, in theory,
so electrical work, plumbing
together.
work, mechanical, you have to inspect within 48 hours.
Correct.
Okay. And then again, that's just to keep the trains running.
Absolutely.
Right? 'Cause time is money.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Part of what inspired it is that, and I think it's part of the same thing that inspired this conversation that brought about the housing task force, right? Is that they saw a couple instances throughout the state where things had just gone real sideways. And all of a sudden projects were being held up by weeks. And in the worst case I ever heard, it was like 8 months or something.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so this was sort of like, no, wait a minute. There's no reason that government especially should not have some shot clocks on it.
Right.
And if they can't, own up to it, then private industry is ready to step in. And that was one of the interesting things for me to learn. Matter of fact, one of my communities, Driggs out in Teton County, they used to use a third-party company for their planning and zoning review of their permits and their inspections, and frankly had a lot of great success with it. And so I had connected with that company as I was sort of building this version of 585 this year.
Well, it sounds like 585 is also a small piece of Representative Redmond's vision to reduce the cost of housing through the contribution that the government brings to increasing the costs of housing. Talk about just in general, philosophically, about how Idaho's government can be part of the solution of reducing the cost of housing.
Yeah, that's a great
question. If you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, in a way, it's a lot of what we were just sort of talking about with that NEPA, right? It's sort of that larger conversation about the federal permitting and how kind of overblown it has become just writ at the state level, right? We as a state can take a look and see where is it that we are protecting life and safety, and where is it that there has been mission creep, right?
Right.
Or where is it that we can put guardrails in place so that there isn't mission creep, right? Because life and safety, that makes sense. That's proper old government, right? That's why you have those organizations.
Right.
That's why you have those practices. But beyond that, peel it back as much as we're able. And so I think that's where it does fit in with that mission, like you say, and that I think that's where you see my philosophy fit in and coming up with these sort of bills.
One more topic on health and welfare, if I might.
Sure.
So in 2018, the health and welfare budget was $706 million. This fiscal year, 2026, it's $1.229 billion. And that includes a base of about $225 million, which is health and welfare on its own. Everything else is Medicaid.
Sure.
Any thoughts on how there's been some bills, House Bill 345, you already mentioned. There's a House Bill 759 and the Senate Bill 1312, which would be transparency on Medicaid rates paid to residential habilitation providers. But are there anything else that you see that can actually start to rein in the rate of that growth? I mean, it's almost doubled in 6 years, Yeah,
I mean, it is a particular challenge because, we as a state have seen tremendous growth, even just since 2020, right? I mean, we were in the top 5 growing states in the nation.
Yeah, for quite a
the
while.
past
Yeah,
several years, right? So that in of itself is a challenge. I will tell you that I have not myself found, and I don't know that there is a silver bullet. Let's just admit that right now, that this is such a complicated issue that we really need to sort of scalpel, not machete, right? We need to find the precise trims that need to be made. ResHab is a good example where right now it looks like the way the structure of the program is set up, that we may be putting people in at the higher cost tier first when that isn't necessary, and they could be at the lower cost and then need to justify their way up to the higher cost. You know, it's things like that that we can find and kind of trim up. The other thing that I don't feel like we have had as much conversation about as I wish we would have is that the pharmaceutical spend in healthcare is a tremendous component of that.
Does Trump's latest, most
Like the
favored
Trump RX
nation,
site?
can that have ripple effects through the state?
I think it could. I think that's the right direction to be going,
Okay.
right? But I think we need to also be willing to start looking at things like, are there some of these specialty drugs that need to have, the ones that are just like millions of dollars per dose, right? That need to have a different guardrail or a different approach taken to them. Again, that's all part of this conversation that we're having. One of the committees I'm sitting on right now that we hadn't necessarily talked about is because it's sort of a niche committee, right? But it's the Medicaid task force. So I'm on that committee that is tasked with looking at what are our options for the comprehensive managed care, like what should that contract look like? And so there are some things we could do there with specialty drugs, high dollar drugs, right? There are ways that we could try to incentivize utilization more towards the generics, those type of things. I'm not convinced that part of the conversation is taking place at as high a volume as it needs to.
Okay. Well, we really do appreciate you spending some time with us today, Representative Josh Wheeler. And as we always say before we sign off, God bless the great state of Idaho. And again, we thank you, Representative Josh Wheeler. You represent Legislative District 35 in Seat B, and you're in your second term. And we just thank you for the service that you've given not only to your city council in Ammon, but to the State House here.
Thank you, Victor.
Sunrise on the Snake River Plain, red, white, and blue in the window pane. Work boots dusty from yesterday, but we're back at it the Idaho way. From timber